You're listening to Kathie's Coaching Podcast, where we observe patterns, not people, and talk about what actually drives behavior inside organizations. Before I tell today's story, I want to be clear about why I'm telling it and why I'm uniquely positioned to talk about this. What I do is observe human systems. I work with leaders and organizations to identify the invisible patterns that lead to burnout, breakdown, and catastrophic failure, long before those failures show up as lawsuits, turnover, or tragedy. This story is about a company that I've observed, a real company, a profitable company, a company that on paper was doing very well. And it's a story about what happens when leadership fixes the wrong problem. There was a company with a large driving workforce, real people, real schedules, real pressure, real consequences. There was an employee named Kyle. Kyle was young, capable, energetic, and highly stimulated. He moved fast. He liked loud music. He liked momentum. He believed he was skilled enough to manage risk. Kyle wasn't malicious. He wasn't careless on purpose. He thought he was capable. And because he had been with the company for a while, long enough to be trusted, he stopped being closely observed. Seatbelts felt restrictive to Kyle. Rules felt flexible. And attention wandered. Then there was Bob. Bob was steady, reliable, responsible. Bob had been hired to manage the fleet. But over time, manage the fleet became manage everything. Schedules, maintenance, compliance, training, documentation, reports, emergencies. If something needed to be handled, the answer was always the same. Give it to Bob. Bob can handle it. And Bob did. No one told Bob to watch Kyle. No one told Bob there was a concern. So Bob trusted the system. And the system trusted Bob. At home, Bob carried the weight quietly. Tension lived in his shoulders. Work followed him into the evenings. When asked how his day was, Bob always said, busy, but fine. Kyle's life was louder, more chaotic. He loved his family, but presence was inconsistent. Still, Kyle showed up to work, and that was considered enough. At the top of the company was the CEO, well-intentioned, intelligent, a leader who talked about values and culture. But he believed leadership lived upstairs, in meetings, reports, dashboards, and boardrooms. He trusted the layers beneath him. He believed that was what good leadership looked like. Over time, Bob became overloaded. So overloaded that he no longer had the capacity to observe. Not because he didn't care, but because he was carrying too much. The very thing Bob was built to do, notice patterns, spot risk, intervene early, was squeezed out by responsibility. Then, one morning, everything changed. The roads were slick, rain, glare, thin margins. Kyle glanced at his phone just for a moment. His seatbelt was off. The vehicle veered. Kyle was killed. It was a fatal accident. And from that moment on, everything accelerated. Investigations, depositions, courtrooms. And Bob, the person who had been quietly holding the system together, was placed under immense pressure. Bob had to testify again and again. He sat under bright lights, answering for a system he did not design. The implication was subtle but unmistakable. This must be Bob's fault. No one asked how Bob was doing. No one asked what he had been carrying. No one asked whether the system itself had failed him. The lawsuit was multi-million-dollar. Insurance was canceled. And despite being a profitable company, They were forced to file for bankruptcy. Kyle's death was devastating, and Bob survived. But survival is not the same as being okay. Afterward, the company acted quickly. They installed advanced technology, cameras, sensors, dashboards. Seatbelts could be monitored. Distraction could be detected. Risky behavior could be flagged. The next Kyle would be caught. Leadership felt relieved. Problem solved. But something critical didn't change. Bob had already left, quietly, burned out, traumatized, never followed up with, never acknowledged. The technology could see the drivers, but it could not see burnout. It could not see overload. It could not see the human cost of silent responsibility. The CEO reviewed reports, reviewed data, reviewed dashboards, but he still didn't go downstairs. He still didn't learn names. He still didn't ask, how much are you carrying? Who needs support? Where is this system fragile? The company became more efficient, but not more human. Another Bob was hired, another Kyle was monitored, and the root cause remained untouched. This is the nuance most organizations miss. Technology is not the enemy. Technology is powerful, but technology detects behavior. Only humans detect strain. If leaders had been observing their people, not managing them through distance and dashboards, this never would have happened. Not the accident, not the trauma, not the bankruptcy. The fix was applied after the damage instead of preventing it at the human level. And that's the gap I work in. I help leaders see what systems can't. I help organizations notice the people who are quietly holding everything together before they break. Because no system is truly safe until someone is watching the ones who never stop carrying it. All right, that's today's episode. If this resonated with you, or if you know a leader who needs to hear it, please share it. And until next time, I'll see you next time. Peace out and namaste.